Good evening from New York. I am Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Welcome to another evening. Thank you for tuning in. This evening is very special to me. As a matter of fact, I am going to just bring him on and let's get started. This handsome gentleman on the other side of the screen is, is my childhood friend, um, Rico Emerson. When we were growing up, I knew him as Richard Emerson. I'm sure he has a story behind all of that. Richard was born in Georgetown and attended Queens College, then got transferred to Bishops with a introduction of coeducation. Immigrated to Canada in 1980, graduated from university and college in 1987 in film and TV production, started his career, and in 1989 became a key grip. Richard, you're currently working on what film right now?
I'm doing a movie called It, which is a remake of a Stephen King classic. It's a horror movie.
What is it like working on a Stephen King's movie?
Um, well, there's a certain amount of respect as a technician that you have because generally Stephen King's movies tend to be classics. They tend to be remakes. They tend to be a part of people's childhood, people's history. They usually evolve out of his novels. Um, I didn't know too much about this particular project or this book, but in the 3 months since I've been on it, I mean, it's been incredible as we go from town to town doing this movie, how many people remember it from their childhood, how many people relate to it.
So,
You know,
what time? How early you started on the set today?
today we started at 8:30,
8:30.
and yeah, days tend to be a normal working day tends to be 12 hours plus an hour for lunch.
Any particular challenges today?
Yeah, boredom. How to appease the boredom. Um, we're doing a lot of scenes today with the clown, who is the main character and the evil character in the film. And there is a fight scene with him and the kids. And during the fight scene, he changes personality and goes in and out of different images and monsters. So we're doing what we call motion control, whereby we have a telescopic crane that we set up a shot. We do the shot with the crane. The computer records that movement and can play it back repeatedly. So as his character changes its physical personality, we can repeat the same move so that when you see the final product, it's a very smooth transition from the clown costume that you will see to the monster, to the scary lady, back to the clown. And that's how some of these things are done.
For those of us not in the industry and not acquainted um, how how long it took you to get where you are in terms of proficiency and understanding what different camera angles and so on and so forth.
To be quite honest, it's a continuous learning process. I mean, I've been in this business 29 years now, and as we grow and develop, so does technology, so does technique. Filmmakers are dreamers. People come with visions quite often, trying to achieve the impossible, trying to do something different than the last filmmaker, trying to take an idea and expand upon it from a previous film. So it's constant evolving in terms of experience and knowledge.
Do you get frustrated sometimes with a shot that is requested of you?
Yes, you do constantly, but sometimes you have to take a pause and remember there are several elements to filmmaking. And quite often, as a technician, we face our own challenges, and sometimes it's very difficult to produce a certain shot from a technical aspect. And you finally figured, oh, we nailed it, as we call it, like we got a great one, but the actor messed up a line, or the director didn't like something, and you have to do it again. And so quite often you have to kind of reset within yourself to start again, and to try to achieve that perfection that we all collectively are working towards to get a great shot.
Getting here is that patience is very important. It's key to what you do.
Patience is a key element in this process, yes.
What is the closest some have come to accurately describing you?
Um, a very patient person, a very independent person. I am a leader in my city, in my industry in Toronto, where I live and work. I have a knack of understanding quickly what I'm up against, the personalities that I'm dealing with, because they change from film to film. Directors change, directors of photography change, producers change, content changes, challenges change. So I think from what I've heard as feedback of those who know me and respect me and admire me is my ability to not be flustered, to not lose my temper, to not show my frustration, but just sort of quietly, face each challenge and try to come up with solutions.
Awesome. Awesome. I don't want to make an assumption here, Richard, because we went to school with a lot of people who have dual nationalities. Where were you born exactly?
I was born in Georgetown.
Okay.
I was born in Georgetown.
So give us a glimpse of life growing up in Georgetown at ages 9 and 14.
Well, I mean, I come from the era in Guyana where we saw the change to some degree, because we grew up under the Burnham regime, and the nationalization of Guyana, and the change that occurred politically, economically, socially in the country. When I think back of watching how the tide sort of changed, so to speak, and as a country where we strove to manage and govern ourselves, there was hardships. Those of us from that era and that age remember how slowly things became more and more difficult to get. Stores weren't as fully stocked as they used to be. There was the growing up, so to speak, of Guyanese, and trying to be independent and trying to move away from colonialism, and and watching industry and commerce being taken over by Guyanese and run by Guyanese, and going through all those, growing pains, as they call it, listening to adults around me, talk, discuss, debate, watching certain things suffer, watching certain things grow. So it was quite an interesting time, and also too, if you recall, there was a little bit of political unrest.
Yeah, I remember that.
At that time.
I want to cut through there and ask you, because I had Graham on, before, but I never asked a Queens College boy what it was like being transferred for co-education into a girls' school. Let me ask you that. What was that experience like for you
It
when you
was
first got there? Mm.
it was difficult in the beginning to accept because so when we came from that system where you went to elementary school and you wrote the big common entrance exam, you know, which was like this horrible thing to go through because you had to have all your ducks lined up in a row on that one day. You had to have your game that day in order to qualify. And I don't know if you remember, but I distinctly remember filling out the form, and you had to have 3 selections of secondary schools you wanted to attend. And I remember because my neighbor next to me, the Ellises, I mean, they had kids, and the youngest son was a little bit older than myself.
Mhm.
Sorry, the light changed in here, but
That's all right.
is that okay still?
Good. Yeah,
Looks
you're still
good?
good. You're still good.
Yeah. And although I came from St. John's Boys School, which is a Catholic school, St. Stanislaus wasn't my first choice. And the reason being was, for those of you who know a little bit about sports in Guyana and remember Mike Christoph, who was a table tennis champion in Guyana during the 70s, he was my godfather.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he came from Queens College. And that basically drove my desire to choose Queens as my number one school. So we wrote the common entrance and I passed, and I went to Queens College, and it was this prestigious boys' school, and it had the great reputation for academics and sports. And and you start at this school, and it's your first year of high school and growing up. And really and truly, by the time we sort of got entrenched in the system of the academics and responsibility of growing up, we got transferred out. And you got sent to a school. And I mean, I couldn't remember the exact average, but I do recall hearing we were like outnumbered something like 15-1 by girls.
Yes, we were.
Because I remember there were kids from, I think, first, second, and third form. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure that were transferred, but I seem to recall there were like 200 and something boys that were transferred from QC over to Bishop's. And I mean, there must have been, 3 times as many girls, if not more.
They were.
So it was, a strange time because you were growing up. You were maturing as a guy. I had never gone to a co-ed school. I'd always gone to a boys' school. And then all of a sudden we were, thrown in the midst of a girls' school and us adapting to them adapting to us socially, as well as the challenges and competitiveness of education and sports. But when I look back upon it and reflect, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Most of us would conclude that. When you think of that time of your life, who are some adults you remember that have made an impact on you and helped to shape this person we know as Richard Emerson?
Well, there were several people during that time. I mean, one of whom was my father, mm-hmm. And the way he, governed and managed himself. But also, we grew up in a time where, politically, again, those of us who know some of Guyanese history, I lived not too far from Dr. Rodney King. I'm sorry, not Dr. Walter Rodney.
Walter Rodney, yeah.
Yeah. And so I would go by his house every day. So I was quite aware of who he was. My family had some dealings with the prime minister before he became the prime minister, when he was a lawyer. And so I knew of him and the accomplishments that he, achieved over the course of his career. Um, my grandmother worked at the National Museum, so I was around, people that were involved with the museum, some artists, sculptors, which I found fascinating. I also played a lot of sports, and so at the time, coming from a small country in a part of the world, um, to watch athletes around me and the Clive Lloyds and the Roy Fredericks, and those are people I knew because I belonged to DCC, the Demerara Cricket Club, because my grandfather was a treasurer there or something. So I was around those guys, but I also paid attention to athletics, and I remember guys like Alberto Wantorina and Orville Haslam, who played table tennis, and Hazley Crawford, the sprinter. Excuse me, the sprinter from Trinidad. And to watch those guys compete on the world level and to be successful was inspiring, because it gave us a sense of accomplishment, and it gave us a sense, or gave me a sense of not fearing the rest of the world that seems so huge and big and great, and in some ways so much better than the world that we came from.
Richard,
But
sorry, you mentioned your grandmother and your dad. Your mom, was she around at that time? Did she?
No, because of our family, I sort of started schooling in Barbados because my grandfather is English and had a plantation there. And my dad was a marine engineer, so was never at home. So my grandfather's home was a more stable place for us to begin.
Got you.
And by the time I got to like 6 or 7, my parents divorced. And my mom immigrated to Canada, I think in 1969. So I kind of grew up with my dad, and my grandmother basically was our chaperone.
Tell us a little bit about your grandmother. What do you remember? What stands out for you when you think about her?
Oh my God, everything about me. My grandmother died a few years ago, almost
Sorry
at the
to hear
ripe
that.
age of 95. Was an incredible woman, independent, strong, well-mannered, taught me so much about life, taught me how to be independent. I'm not such a bad cook. Compliments of watching, a great cook in my grandmother. Someone who came from, my grandmother is originally from Berbice, and came from a poor background, but elevated herself in such a way that carried herself in a very upright manner, never depended on no one, never was disrespectful, always, gave whatever she had, she would share. And those are the things that stuck with me over the years. And eventually she emigrated to Canada after I was here. So I got to be with her, again, in the last part of her life. And I would trade none of that time spent with her for anything in the world.
If
no movie, no superstar, no movie star, no nothing.
If these two people, your grandmother and your dad, were to describe you to a stranger, what do you think each of them would say?
I think they would describe me as someone who grew up, who matured, who made something of themselves, because I know both of them were very proud up to their last days of who I had become and what I had achieved. That I think both of them felt that they got through to me eventually,
Yeah.
and that the lessons they taught me somehow along the way I learned and retained. And I'm not perfect, but I I have a lot of my grandmother and my dad in me.
You
And
migrated to Canada in what, 1980,
1980, yes,
right? And you continued school, but your formative years are at Bishop's,
absolutely.
growing up in Guyana. When you got to Canada, of course, there's a difference in culture. Must have been some culture shocks and so on. But how much of your preparation in Guyana helped you to navigate the various, you know, or helped you to adjust to the different culture in Canada?
Well, I'm going to tell you honestly, it took a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came to Canada, things were a little bit different than they are now. There's, all across the world, there's a whole evolution of culture and interracial marriages and, a whole interchanging of cultures that have sort of amalgamated into one big, huge melting pot, which is what I see today. When I got here, it wasn't quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in a suburb outside of Toronto, which was predominantly, Caucasian. And I think a lot of people like myself at the time when we moved here, I guess in the 70s or early 80s, you found yourself kind of lost. And you were often worried that I am a stranger to these people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really correlate to anyone of my age. I don't know their history. I don't know their culture. I don't know the things they talk about because it wasn't part of my youth. But what really struck me was they had a fascination about me and where I was from, and the things that I'd seen, and I remember, like, discussing certain things that I'd done or places I'd been, in the Caribbean, and they would always be like, "Oh man, that's so cool." And so after a while, I learned to shed the inhibitions of trying to be like them, to be accepted by them, which I thought was, oh, maybe I should just try and conform and be more like them. And then they wouldn't think I was some sort of, outsider or immigrant. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I don't have to do that. I can just be me. And that was okay. So what happened was when I immigrated, I just did 1 year of high school, which was what they call grade 13 here, which was sort of the equivalent of A levels. And then I went off to university. So, and by the time I got to university, I'd already shed, this inhibition and this wanting to belong, and just was myself. And I found that was okay. It was okay to be from Guyana. It was okay to be different, and they accepted that.
Uh-huh. So Richard, now you are the key grip or a key grip.
Yeah.
And but I'm curious to know how did this journey into the film industry begin for you, and when?
Well, what happened was I got to the end of school, and I was going to play sports. I mean, I played cricket in Guyana. I played table tennis. I played some of that sport up here. I played soccer, and I was going to go to university and play soccer and do kinesiology. And I got hurt in the summer before my last semester, which was when we did all the showcasing to coaches. And so I quickly had to abandon that idea. And I felt that if I couldn't play sport, I didn't want to be part of it. So I turned my back on kinesiology, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do what my dad did, which was be a marine engineer. or go to sea. I remember as a kid being on some of the oil tankers traveling amongst the Caribbean. And I remember one afternoon we were at sea in the middle of the Atlantic somewhere, and I was talking to one of the deck crew, and he said, you know, this is a great job. He goes, the way I look at it, I get paid to see the world. And I thought, oh my God, that's the coolest thing. And that conversation stuck with me. So then I thought, okay, let me chase this dream and be like my dad, like many, you know, young men want to do. And then I realized in order to become qualified and certified, the quickest way was to go to Coast Guard College. So when I did all my research, I realized that I needed to have some science credits in order to be accepted. And I'd already graduated high school. And I thought, no, you know what? I'm not turning back right now. I'm done with high school. So forget about this. What am I going to do now? So I turned to entertainment, which was something I loved. I mean, you know, like I explained to you earlier, I was part of the State Society at Bishops, and I'd been around music and played in the Bishops High School combo. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this for a career. So I went to university and did a BA in mass communications. And then got to the end of that and thought, you know, I would like to, you know, specialize in something more. So I applied to one of the leading colleges in Toronto called Ryerson to do radio and television, because all my intentions was to return to Guyana or the Caribbean and live and work. And I didn't get accepted to that school because I didn't have much photography experience. But the next best community college that there is in Toronto was Humber College, and they had a program in film and television. So I said, okay, I'll go do that. And did my 3 years, came out, and I graduated at the time of the birth of HBO and the video networks and the movie channels. And there was an incredible need for films and videos and all this product in order to fulfill these new channels. So it quickly led to me getting in. You know, I got working on production the very year I graduated. I got onto a TV series as a grip. And a year and a half of working under that key grip, we did a TV series in Toronto, which was a modern day version of a very old television show in the States called Rin Tin Tin, which was about a police dog. So we did the first season of the new Rin Tin Tin show. And then my boss at that time had an offer to go start a new series and basically thought I was ready and handed over, with the blessing of the producers at the time, that show to me. And that was my beginning as a key grip in 1989. And in true Guyanese form and style, and I grabbed that opportunity and I ran with it. And I basically never turned back. I went from job to job to job. I learned on the job and you know, applied myself and accepted all the challenges that came my way. And lo and behold, here I am.
For those who might not know, excuse me, what is a key grip? And what is the key grip's primary function on a set?
Right. Well, when you look at movie credits, you will see titles. And every time you see a title that's preceded by the word key, it means that person is the head of that department. And we're one of the technical departments on a movie set. So the grip department is responsible for all camera placement and movement, for rigging, for lighting, for rigging for construction. We also are responsible when you see the making of movies and they shoot in front of all the big green screens, we build those. We're also responsible for the diffusing of light and the making of shadows of light. So quite often when you're watching a movie and there's shadows on the wall and there's dark and there's light and there's contrast, that stuff is all artificially created and by grips.
Wow. What was your most challenging movie?
Wow. I would have to say, usually the most challenging movies are the movies that are lower budget, because they don't have the money to afford the manpower, the technology, excuse me, the equipment that may be necessary in order to achieve what they're trying to set out to do. So for me, those are the most challenging jobs, because you don't have everything at your fingertips. You know, I did a Suicide Squad last year, which is out in the theaters now. I mean, there was a $175 million budget. You needed an extra crane, 10 more guys, more trucks. It was there at your fingertips. Those jobs are challenging. Excuse me. Those jobs are challenging because of the volume of what you have.
Excuse me.
But given that, there is no shortage of money to accomplish what you need to do. So it just requires some planning. Whereas the movies that have less money, you're trying to give them the best product. And that's how I work. I take a job, I don't care what the budget is. You hire me, you have me 110%. I will work as hard on a $5 million movie as I will on a $50 million movie.
Richard, let's take a quick break.
Okay.